Welcome to CISO's Insiders Podcast, powered by GRC Consulting. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing leading CISOs and security leaders in the industry for light, eye-level conversations. Here, they share advice and tips, talk about their biggest accomplishments and failures, favorite drinks, key influencers, and much more. We encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more content, please check us out on social media.
Okay, and welcome everybody. Today I'm speaking to Mark. Not sure how to pronounce your last name actually.
Haupt.
Mark Haupt. Mark brings over 25 years of extensive information security and information technology experience in a wide range of industries and institutions. He holds the Master's of Information Security and Assurance degree. He has numerous security and technical certifications from what I read: CISSP, CCSP, CEH, CHFI, Security Plus, Network Plus, and probably more. I know you have a lot of extensive experience with FedRAMP, HIPAA, PCI DSS. I know you're a member of ISC2, ASIS International, IAP, and ISACA. And I think right now you're the acting CISO of, and you're actually the CISO of DataBank.
Correct.
And, I think this is a great point where you can jump in and, just give a quick background description about yourself and your history, maybe.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much for the introduction. And certainly those acronyms that are around the certifications and such with my name are a mouthful, but just to put it simply, yes, I am the CISO at DataBank. I've been with DataBank for 6.5 years in that role and in that position, which is, as we all know, in the CISO world, that's a lifetime. So kind of a Methuselah of a CISO type of situation. But prior to being a CISO, I've spent many years in everything from military government work to financial sectors. Worked myself up from being a cryptologist in the military to working even on help desks inside of financial organizations and inside of healthcare institutions. So my background with HIPAA goes all the way back to the beginning, dealing with financial institutions, Sarbanes-Oxley and GLBA, things like that from the beginning of those. And I also have some really fun stuff in my background dealing with forensic investigations. I was introduced to that and got a couple of certifications regarding EnCase and a few of those types of tools while working at one of the financial institutions. So there's a lot of stories behind that one as well, being able to not only conduct employee investigations that are pretty standard with HR, but actually putting people in jail for the credit card theft and credit card fraud that they've done through inside of an organization. So that a lot of little fun stuff going along. And then I spent 7 years in the academic world as well as the CTO and CISO of a very small university here in central Illinois, where I live right now.
Okay, and thank you for that introduction. Yeah, it's definitely a very diversified history. I think you would have. I mean, you mentioned forensic investigation, working for both them government space, military, and financial tech, and yeah, and conducting investigations as well. Very diverse and interesting. Yeah, not the common CISO. That just say that. Okay, so, and just to break the ice, what can you tell us about yourself in terms of your marital status?
Yeah.
And maybe favorite drink.
So all those things that can be used by a social engineering person to take over, right?
Exactly. Exactly. But I have faith in you that you don't keep your kid's birthday as passwords.
That's exactly right. So actually, I do call myself the transparent CISO because I've had a number of conversations like this. So I am married, have been for 24 years this year, and we have three kids, and all of them have gone off from high school into the real world. One of them is in the military right now. I'm proud of all three of the successes of my kids and the young men that they've grown into. And very, very proud of the different education, different paths that they've gone in life. So none of them have followed along the security path like I have, but one of them has followed the military path, and another one is following a technology path with social media and podcasting and things along those lines. So they've kind of take some deviations, but they've gone there and that route. I love going to Montana. I live in Illinois, very flat land, but I love going to Montana. I love being in the mountains and going up doing hiking. And one of my passions is photography, which has two different avenues. If you do go out on social media and whatnot and do searches, you'll see I have photography of wildlife and mountain landscapes. And I also do aviation photography. One of the things that I got to do about 10, 12 years ago is actually follow an air show team around as photographer and videographer for a summer to about a half dozen different air shows here in the Midwest. And I was part of their crew, so I got to be behind the scenes and enjoy that. But I've loved aviation and love doing the photography for most of my life. I grew up in the military. My dad was in the military. We spent time moving all across the country and overseas. And so being around air bases, being around the military type of situation, I fell in love with the aviation aspect of it. Okay,
very interesting. And remind me to talk to you after the podcast about something related to that. Yeah, I was stuck on the fact that you have 3 boys. I mean, it seems like a lot. But and what about your favorite drink? I know a lot of CISOs are single malt type of people.
Yeah, well, for a couple of different reasons, I actually don't. I don't drink alcohol or liquor, but my favorite drink is Coke. How's that? Pretty tame.
Wow.
But even that, I don't drink very often. Even that, I do water quite frequently. And I'll tell you just a little bit of a thing with me is it's a little bit of a challenge is keeping the weight off. And so I'm very rigid and very disciplined about what I put in. And in the past year a year this month, I've actually lost 120 pounds and gotten myself back into shape. So.
Wow, that's a lot.
And see, that's what CISO, being a CISO will do to you is you sit there and you drink and, Cokes, malt liquors, whatever you want in order to get through it. And then it comes to a point where that has to stop. So health reasons force it.
Impressive. I mean, if I could, I would drink Coke all day, every day. I love it, but I try to limit to just every once in a while when I go out. So we never buy Coke. We don't have Coke in the house and, stuff like that. And I lost 38 pounds in the last year, but 120 is pretty impressive.
Well, 38 is impressive too with, a lot of people put it on during COVID, but it looks like we took it off. So.
Well, I also have a lot of discipline. So, I start my morning usually with a 9.5 mile run. Wow. So I mean, I'm not going to put it on the podcast, but I'm also quite disciplined in that manner. So let's jump right in. Let me ask you a couple of questions here again, just to be able to better understand you and your mindset. What's the one thing that you wish you had known when you began your career?
Wow. So there's a ton of things I wish I had known. First of all, it has really nothing to do with security. It has everything to do with what we just talked about with discipline and wisdom. Lots of times when we're younger men, when we're younger people in general, we seem to be very brash and we go in all force and very opinionated. And one of the things that I've learned over time that's made me a successful CISO is to sit back and listen more than I talk. When I was much younger, I would talk more than I listened. So when you listen to people, you can extract from them what their real concerns, their fears and uncertainties and doubts are. and you can also extract from them, from a technology perspective as a CISO, you can extract more data and you can extract more information, have a dialogue instead of ticking people off and closing them down. So listening, having a little bit more wisdom to do that, and having a little bit more discipline to keep the mouth shut is probably the biggest thing that I would say.
Yeah, and I would also add that, in my opinion, I found out that listening to your colleagues, customers, and peers, rather than just just blabbing, like right out, is actually a good technique to employ anyhow. And it's even a good, in my opinion, it's even a good sales technique, because you get to listen to your potential customer, you get to learn about their pain points, and then you might you can decide like if there's a fit or not. But right. Yeah, and I think it plays well with other answers that I've gotten so far, that surround yourself by, be the most stupid man in the room, surround yourself by smarter people than yourself.
Right.
So yeah, and having touched about that, what would you say your biggest failure was in your career?
Well, I've got a couple. I've got more than a couple of those, but probably my biggest failure was what I just talked about a moment ago, from a personality perspective. I recall when I was in the military, I was because of a lot of reasons. I was very disciplined and very, very focused, and so I was promoted not just in rank, but also with awards and different things like Junior Sailor of the Year and things like that. And when I transferred from one command to the other, the first command was one that was really just pushing that ego and pushing that promoting me as a person and pushing forward and saying, just keep going, keep going, keep going. I went to a different command where I stepped right in the door. I didn't listen. I didn't wait for people to learn who I was. I stepped right in the door with that ego that I left the previous command from. And it totally ruined the 18 months that I was there. It ruined friendships or potential friendships. It ruined professional relationships. It soured me on being a continued member of the military. And as a result, I got out of the military, which there's good and bad in that. I probably wouldn't be a CISO right now if I'd stayed in the military. But that was probably one of the biggest failures that I had, was not just being patient and being calm, but taking that very aggressive approach, that very aggressive ego with me straight in the door, and expecting other people to bow down to who another organization had made me already, and not realizing that making me in that other organization had taken a 2-year process from the point in which I walked in the door. So that's one failure. A technical failure that I like to share about, and I share this with younger folks quite frequently. I was operating a mainframe communication system, again, for the military. And I was in Washington, D.C., so I'll let your mind go from there as to who I might have been helping service through that communication system. But in the middle of the night, I punched the wrong buttons, and that communication system went down. It was an old mainframe back in 1991, 92 timeframe. So it was 1960s technology. And it required 15, 20 minutes to reboot and put it back online. And so for a period of 15 or 20 minutes, let's just say some very high-ranking political and other officials of the United States may not have been able to get their communications traffic through the primary means. Of course, there's always backup solutions, and it was all my fault. So that was a huge technical failure. But what I do is I tell that story, and then I immediately tell that, the recovery of that, owning the problem, settling down and being disciplined, and not making those kinds of mistakes in the future is how you get through it, instead of being the type of person that would say, well, somebody didn't train me right, or I didn't the documentation wasn't correct. No, if you own the problem, then you can correct the problem yourself and get through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that certainly sounds like a glorified failure here, but it seems that you were able to take a
Mhm.
lot of value out of it. So, and
Mhm.
as someone told me in one of my previous episodes, I think his phrase was failure is a feedback loop that you learn out of. So,
Mhm. Yeah, well, a phrase I would use is fail forward. Lots of
yeah,
times when we fall, we fall and we collapse, and then it takes time for us to get up. But if you fail forward, you're still moving in that forward direction, and you get up and then you keep on going.
yeah, definitely. And having touched on these few failures, what would you say, or what would you pin as your biggest accomplishment?
Well, again, this could go down so many different verticals. My biggest accomplishment is raising my boys to be who they are. Family is important to me. On the professional side of things, I think the last six years or so has been a huge and wonderful ride here at DataBank, and has been a tremendous accomplishment for me. Moving into the CISO role, there were things that we had to correct whenever I came on board here. We stumbled a little bit with FedRAMP, and we recovered from that. I built a team that's based on empowerment and trust, and I have very few people from my team here at DataBank that resign and move on to other locations. So our team is, I've got some folks on my team that have been with me for 5 years and more. And so I view my current role right now as a huge success, and maintaining this role, looking at, either twice or three times longer than the average of a CISO in a role, which is either 2 or 3 years, depending on which statistics you look at. Being here for 6.5 years is a tremendous accomplishment, and having people, on the backside of that, having people still look to me for the right answers, and still respect the role that I'm in, instead of writing me off as a CISO that's too far on one side or the other. Writing that middle line, and having a sense of the business in mind, and bringing the security to the business is what's made a success out of this.
Yeah, and that's a gutsy move, by the way, in my opinion, because most CISOs I know tend to stick in their role anywhere between 2 to 4 years. But by staying longer than that, you're really owning whatever
Right.
potential issues you might
Right.
have, right? You can't really blame anyone else but
Exactly.
yourself. Uh, yeah, well, gutsy, as I said. um, what advice would you want to give to someone that wanting to start their career in
Right.
cybersecurity, and eventually maybe hold a similar position
Mm-hmm.
to yours?
So my biggest advice would be to map out your career from the start. Decide which vertical within security you want to go into, and but don't stick to that vertical. So one of the things that's made me successful is I'm what I call a mile wide and an inch deep. So my technical knowledge, there's some things that I can really go deep on. I mean, you have to go deep when you're doing forensic analysis. So you have to understand the technology. But when you're going to want to be a CISO, there's a point where you have to pull back, and you have to think about the breadth of knowledge that you need, instead of the depth of the knowledge that you need. And so that's a big piece of advice that I would give anybody that's wanting to be a CISO, is know when to step back and look at a breadth. Try new roles, take a step outside of what might be a traditional security role, and rethink what you're doing. So for example, I was a CISO and CTO inside of a university, for 7 years. When I was done with that process, I went and I took a complete step down, and I went back into the grunt level work, if you will, as a business security analyst for a large financial insurance organization. And through that, I was able to reconnect at a lower level with the businesses and the technologies that has led to me being successful here at DataBank. Because now I understand much more about how the business operates and what the business needs in order to operate both. So I deliberately took that step back. So if you're wanting to be a CISO, look at when you need to go to be that mile wide instead of an inch deep type of solution, and be willing to take roles that might be less challenging or even less a security role in order to gain that breadth of knowledge that you need.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that mindset. By the way, I've given out very similar pieces of advices to, former employees of mine and colleagues and peers. I'm with you 100% on that. I do feel that in order to be successful in a CISO role, or in any high-level managerial capacity, you need to have a breadth. You need to understand, like, the landscape. You need to understand the ecosystem, not specifically like, just one silo out of it. And you can't be an expert on all silos, obviously. So yeah, definitely on you. I'm definitely with you on that. And I know you mentioned that you're part of a previous organization, as part of you had like an IT related function. And I'm not sure, like right now, who do you report to? Is it to an IT function or not? But just a general question, a lot of CISOs in the industry, and I think there's a shift, but still a lot of CISOs in their industry are a part of the IT organization.
Right.
And there are obviously some pros and cons about that. Do you have any specific feelings or insights about that?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I think, first of all, CISOs try and position themselves for power too much. I believe in leadership and not power. And I believe that any of our power should come through our leadership. Now, let me explain what that means. I am not, as the CISO at DataBank, I am technically not reporting to the CTO, but I report to the Vice President of Managed Services Operations, which is probably the most technical person from an operational perspective in our entire organization. But I have responsibilities throughout the entire company. And so leadership is influence. And one of the things that we as CISOs need to do, regardless of where we are placed, we need to be able to politic and have influence in every aspect of the organization. And if you're not effective at leadership, again, and I'm specifically talking leadership, not management or not managing a program, but actual leadership where you're influencing a person and you're leading the charge, then that's probably something that you need to take a step back and figure out how you can be a better leader. Because once you're a better leader, then you can have that influence throughout the organization. You get out there and you shake people's hands, you develop authentic relationships with people where they're willing to come to you and ask the tough questions, because you're not going to turn around and give them the pat security answers. You're going to give them a qualified answer that says, okay, I understand you're doing this and this and this, and here's the best solution for you now, and here's the best solution for you in the future from a security perspective. So the leadership aspect of that and making sure that you drive that home is a key piece. So that's one thing that I would tell CISOs is to stop trying to power grab, stop trying to become the guy or the gal that reports directly to the CEO and has direct reporting to the board. All of that will come in time if you have leadership and influence within the organization. And I have that, and I don't report directly to the CEO, but I know this, that I can pick up the phone and I can call or send an email to my CEO. And because I don't bug him with day-to-day things or day-to-day management type of stuff, if I pick up that phone, my influence says, yeah, he's going to pick up the phone and answer and have a good conversation about it and understand that my concern is real. So that's how I address the situation. I think that the CISOs are trying to power grab too much right now.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. So basically what you're saying, that it doesn't really matter where you're positioned in the organization, but it matters like the type of network of relationships that you were able to build up, and leadership skill that you were able to develop. And let me ask you a follow-up question. Do you think that's related to that experience share that you provided me with about your, the second command when you came in and, all puffed with pride and full of ego?
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it, because I saw where I failed in that, and I learned from that. I learned that I can't just walk in and say, I'm CISO, so you will do what I say. or in that case, I can't just walk in and in that situation, I literally walked in and said, I was Junior Sailor of the Year at the previous command, and expected a response that I wasn't getting. As a result of that, I expected people to respect me just simply because I was wearing some title. And I think that you're right. I think I learned that early on, that just because you have a title doesn't mean that you're going to effectively do that job. You have to find other means and influences and leadership in order to attain what you're trying to get to.
Yeah, and I agree. And being, and you've mentioned a lot of like a lot of experiences that you've had and a lot of positions. But I just wanted to ask you a quick question about the best resources that have helped you along the way. Is there anything specific? Is it more along the lines of, I don't know, like self-learning, or is it anything? Is it people? You have any specific thoughts?
Yeah, all the above. So I would recommend that anybody wanting to move into a leadership position, even if you don't want to move into a leadership position, I think this is good for your life. You need to have 3 disciplines in your life. Number one is you need to have a mentor. You need to have somebody that you can look up to, somebody that can pour into your life and that you open up to with, and I don't want to get too mushy about it, but you open up to, and you're willing to take the critique and the criticism from that individual and assume positive intent by them doing so. If you're not hearing that you don't have that kind of person, you're not hearing that voice in your life right now. And this could apply from everything from being, a father and a husband, a family man, family woman, to your job. If you don't have somebody in your life that can speak truth into your life, then you're missing out on a ton of not only friendship and fun, but also growth and potential. People who close themselves off and don't have that kind of thing, they tend to be stagnant. So that's number one. Number two is I do believe in education. I do have a master's degree and a bachelor's degree, but I don't necessarily believe that you have to go to college in order to be successful. I think there's other ways to get an education, a formal education, through certifications, through other means, but overall, the category of having some sort of professional education, and make sure that you're a lifelong learner. Make sure that you do not just say, okay, I went out and got that certification in order to get this job. I'm done now and no more. But that's one of the reasons I have a lot of the acronyms, a lot of the titles or the certifications after my name, is because I'm continually learning and keeping them up to date and adding new ones as time goes on. And then the third thing is also a continuous learning piece, but it's more of a personal learning piece. I am a reader, and I use that in quotes because, sitting down and reading a book sometimes can be a little difficult with a time consumption piece. But I've learned that audiobooks are incredibly helpful for me to get more content into my head. When I'm on an airplane, when I'm walking through the airport, when I'm out walking and exercising, for example, or even when I'm doing some of my hobbies, I can plug in an audiobook through, or even a podcast into my head through the headset and listen to what's going on and gain enough knowledge, new knowledge and information from that. So mentorship, education, and reading of some sort, whether that's audiobook or actually sitting down with a book, is absolutely important for me moving forward in my career.
Okay, and thank you for that. And I know you mentioned the mentors. Are there any, like, a few individuals you'd like to name drop and, just mention and recognize as being the most influential to you?
Yep. So there's a couple. There is a former CISO that I have. I'm not sure he would appreciate that I tell his name out there, but Roy Mellinger is a CISO that I had when I worked at a financial institution about 15 years ago, and I learned a tremendous amount from him. And keep in mind that when you have a mentor like that, you're learning both things that you want to do in your future and things that you also do not want to do. So any of my mentors, that's the way it's been. Another individual, Dr. Gary Johnson, is an individual I remain in contact with today, and I remain in somewhat of a mentorship with him today. He's one of those types of individuals that can speak truth into my life when he sees that I'm doing something wrong, whenever I'm stressed, when I'm going too far in one emotional state or another. When there's a lot of things going on, he's one that can speak into me and say, okay, you need to calm down, or what you said in that was a little too harsh, or maybe you could have done this a little bit differently. So he's one. And then I have folks that are kind of temporary mentors, if you will, that are around in my life as well. I've got a couple of them right now. I look to my current boss as my mentor. Actually, Jeremy Pease is somebody that I'm learning tremendously from, and he's actually somebody that's younger than me. The other two are older, but Jeremy's younger than me, and I'm learning from him. So don't be afraid to learn from somebody that's younger from you, or younger than you as well. They may bring some things to the table that you never thought of. And so Jeremy brings a lot of stuff to the table for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And is there any common myths about the profession or the field of cybersecurity that you wanted to debunk?
Yeah. So, well, it's not really. So there's one that's sort of a myth, but unfortunately is also a reality. And I think that we need to combat that inside of the CISO realm, if you will. And that's where we're called CISNOs all the time. Because CISOs run around saying no about things. One of the things I learned, and again, going back to my breadth instead of depth conversation, and I learned through taking a step back and going to the business security analyst role, was being able to find a way to support the business. In other words, saying yes, but every time, or most every time. That way, when you do have to say no, your no means more than than just a flippant no. When you're saying no, then people, and you have the influence of always saying yes, or trying to say yes for them, saying yes, but if you do this, this, and this, you'll get to the yes. And then you have to, at some point, if you have to come say no, it's like what I was talking about the CEO. When I pick up the phone and call my CEO, there's a reason for it. So whenever there's a no, there's a reason for it, and people pay more attention to that. Another thing within the security realm that I think is either a myth or a misconception that we need to change is that we are not technologists, and quite frequently we are technologists, and quite frequently those of us, for example, that have done forensics or done other things along those lines have either grown up through technology or have a fairly deep technology background, and we can run with the best of the network engineers or run with the best of the systems engineers. And so I think that if I were not in security, I would encourage people who are not in security to say, hey, wait a minute, give these guys a chance. They're not just people that are out there to bug at me and cause problems in my life. They are actually out there to help me. And then the final thing would be, another myth is that you have to be a technologist to be in security, and that's not true. You can come up through the legal and compliance side of things. You can be an application developer, which is not always viewed as technologist. You can be a privacy professional and come up through the legal field from that perspective and still be a very effective a very effective security and compliance CISO, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and I agree with you on all that. And especially like what you said about the misconception that the CISO has to grow from technology. I mean, I found that not to be the case. It might be the case with some countries in some cultures, but definitely at the end of the day, it's a C-level position. It's a business-related position. You need to be able to talk to the business. You need to be able to support and contribute to the business. So, I mean, it helps definitely if you have a technology background, but I wouldn't say it's a must.
Right.
But that's just, my personal take on that.
Yep.
Can you share maybe a bit about the main concerns that in your mind that CISOs nowadays have? Like, is it around like a specific space, or I don't know, around budget? Like anything you might think of.
So budgeting's been something that we've always been concerned about. No CISO ever gets all the money they want. And personally, I put that one aside. That's one of those things. I read a book a couple of months ago, said Necessary Endings. It was the name of the book. And it talked about, those things are outside of your control. Just put them aside, because otherwise you'll just spin around in your head and cause problems. And budgeting is one thing that I've just said, you know what, I'm never going to get all the money I want. I need to find a way to accomplish things with the limited funds that I have. So that's one thing that's always out there. But what keeps me up at night is basically what your question is. What keeps security professionals up at night? I would say it's changed, and it continues to change. I'm not going to lie to you. 6 months ago, 10 months ago, I might have told you that, yeah, ransomware is ransomware. You know, we can defend against it. We can recover from it if we have good security hygiene. And I'll still profess that to be true. But the more and more we have these ransomware attacks, like what happened to Colonial Pipeline and JBS, and this past weekend with the Revil attacks against thousands of companies, these guys are getting more aggressive, and they're getting more forthright, and they're getting more brazen in their attacks. And that's something that's concerning me quite considerably right now, because yes, I know how to recover from it. I know how to deal with it, but you know, the fact that they are attacking so brazenly right now and demanding the money that they're demanding is very concerning. The other thing that concerns me is the one thing that a lot of professionals in my role that don't work with the government and the military don't have a lot of control over, but as a reality is there is a cyber war going on out there between APTs, the advanced persistent threats, and nation state type of situations. And one of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to get in the middle of that, although I know that we host companies that are in the middle of that. And because, you know, any company, I don't care whether you're a large financial organization or if you're a small mom and pop type organization, none of these types of companies can defend against a nation state attack that's deliberate. They have the entire resources of their version of the NSA, you know, the Russian GRU, the Chinese version, the Iranian version, so on and so forth. They have the entire resources to levy against you. You can't defend against that. You can do your darndest to do it. You can do your best to do it, but you just can't as a company. You can't. And that goes back to my budget comment. We don't have the budget of a federal government to deal with. So that is one of the things that keeps me is an increasing concern right now, is dealing with the nation state cyber war that is literally going on right now behind the scenes that people don't realize is happening.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a huge disparity here, you know, of not only in the
Right.
US, but I think mostly in the US and possibly Israel. A lot of like private and public companies are being held like, you know, like held hostage in between like nation cyber wars. And it just, you know, it's a huge disparity. And, you know, it's actually worth just a dedicated podcast, or maybe a panel just to discuss that specific topic.
Absolutely. That is definitely a topic that can be discussed for an hour or more.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you again about that. Maybe we can put a panel together or something. Anything you'd like to share, and again, this is optional, anything you'd like to share about either your daily routine, or maybe and also about budget planning, like mostly about like the changes from 2020, 2019 to 2021. Again, I'm looking for trends. I'm not looking to uncover or unravel anything about your specific company.
No, you're fine. So my daily routine, I call my daily routine continuous monitoring with the immediate ability to pivot towards an attack. So, you know, when I come in, before I come into the office every day, when I get up in the morning, I'm already looking at what's, you know, what is going on in the world. And this comes from my background in the military of reading the intelligence reports as soon as I can in the morning, so I understand what's going on in the rest of the world. Keeping an eye out on geopolitical politics and things that are going on. You know, a couple months ago, we had the situation with the airliner in Belarus and how that might impact. And now we're dealing with Haiti. You know, Haiti's a lesser thing, but, you know, just keeping that in mind, that there's a situation in Haiti right now, and you know, the withdrawal from Afghanistan that we're doing right now and how that might impact cybersecurity going around. So these are the kinds of things that I review in the morning. So basically I read the newspaper electronically or whatnot is one of the first things I do. I also carve out some personal time for me. And I won't go into detail on what I do there, but I carve it out so that I can center myself And I'm talking about myself, my personal mind and my soul, in centering myself in before I start my day. I need to do that. Then once I start my business day, it's again continuous monitoring, looking at our systems, what's going on overnight, what type of critical events have popped up, what kind of alarms and alerts have my SOC sent me to review. So it's another intelligence review, or like the president would have a presidential daily briefing from his intel units. I kind of model it off that, if you will. I get reports that come in. And a lot of them I collect myself or come in via email so that I don't bother my team, but I analyze those. And then I'm starting from there, what are the hot topics need to be done? Do I need to talk to other people within the organization to have influence and kind of push some projects along that are not moving? And I go through meetings. I do a lot of sales events. And I do a lot of these kinds of conversations, the podcast type of conversations as well. So that's how my day goes, and it usually goes well into the evening. I take specific breaks for meal times. I take specific breaks to spend some time with the family to make sure that there's some balance in that area as well. And then as far as budgeting is concerned, what's different between 2019, 20, and 21? Quite frankly, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question from my own organizational perspective, simply because we're a mergers and acquisitions company, and what we look like in 2019 versus what we look like today, literally 150 to 200 people organization with 20 data centers in 2019. And now we have 65 data centers and over 700 people. We used to be just the United States. Now we're spread across the world. So my budgeting has obviously changed as a result of that, but it's not a trend. But I will tell you one thing I've been seeing as trending in a lot of areas, in a lot of conversations I've been having, is a renewed focus on the budgeting for work from home security technologies. People are now talking again about at CISO level about saying, hey, it's not a bad idea that we pay for the internet connection in someone's home, because then we can dictate some control over what that looks like. There's discussion of going ahead and paying for that for each of the approved work from home workforce personnel. Then we could pay for the routers and the switches that might go behind that. This software that's on a lot of laptops and a lot of work from home devices needs to be enhanced, and a lot of vendors are coming out with new add-on tools to existing software that will allow for detections and alerting for things that are going on inside of a person's home that we don't have physically we don't have access to. And those are some of the challenges that we're dealing with from a security perspective inside of our budget. And I know a lot of CISOs are focusing in on that as their 2020 and 2021 budgeting comes around. I can see in the future that that's going to run its course, and we're going to need to come back to perimeter technologies in our office spaces, and then the cloud budget. I can see this from the sales side of our organization. There's a lot of organizations that are moving to the cloud that had not previously moved. Maybe they had co-location space, or they had their own on-prem data centers. Because of what happened in 2020, they're now saying, I need that outside of my space, either to place their on-prem data centers inside of co-location spaces like a DataBank, or moving it straight to the cloud so that somebody else is managing those. And there's a big shift going on, and this will be it, but there'd be a big shift going on right now with people switching jobs. There was a number of people that were laid off because of COVID that are now gaining jobs. And then as a result of that, the wages have gone up. So people who had kept their jobs are now seeing those wages go up, and they're now moving and putting themselves on the market and looking at new jobs as well. So these things are all factors into the budgeting aspect that we need to look at going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. That's interesting. Super interesting to learn that, companies are like, the trend right now is in terms of budget is, basically to pay, the internet fees and whatnot, all related fees for employees. Yeah. Interesting. Let's switch gears here, because I know we're running out of time. Just a few quick questions here, plus a bonus one. Put yourself in the shoes of a vendor just for a moment. What is it so assuming you're a vendor what is the one promise you make to yourself to never do when, when engaging with a customer or trying to engage with a potential customer?
Yeah, don't send, I will never send the unsolicited emails, especially the ones that come to a person like myself, and then a couple of days later you get the email that says, hey, you didn't reply to my last email, or hey, I didn't get a response, kind of thing. Those, I know that those are canned, those are not authentic. If I'm a vendor, if I'm in sales, even if I'm a CISO in a vendor, I want authentic, real relationships with people. I want to, either pick up the phone or somehow, go to a trade show or something and press the flesh with a handshake and get introduced that way, and then develop that relationship on so I could pick up the phone and call somebody. Those are the best relationships that I have as CISO. And if I were on the flip side of it, that's the way I would handle my sales funnel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been getting a similar answer a lot. And talking about, vendors and unsolicited emails, what's the most annoying sales pitch that you've encountered?
Well, it's annoying and it's sad all in one, but you get some of these younger people, maybe, as straight out of college or whatnot, and all they're doing is reading off of a script. And part of me feels sad for them that they haven't figured out how to go beyond a script and create their own talking points, if you will, and work from those. Or maybe their company's requiring them to read off of a script. I don't know, but those are the saddest, because you sit there and they're just as you're listening to them, they're just a recorded message that's not really recorded. And you can tell that their heart's not in it. You can tell that they're just repeating it. And those are the ones that are annoying, and they're sad at the same time. I'm the kind of person that just wants to say, hey, stop. Okay, you're not going to get my sale, but let me give you a piece of advice. Come up with your own script, if you will, or come up with your own something that sounds real instead of just simply reading off of a piece of paper.
Yeah. And okay, and talking about that, and I think I know what your answer would be for my next question. Sorry, because you alluded to it a few times in our call now. But what is it that you are looking for in a vendor?
You know exactly what it is: authentic relationship.
So authentic relationships, and
being able to, for me to be as the flip side of that, on the one who's being sold side, I like to be able to call up my sales guys that are on the vendor side and say, this is what I need. I need a quote pretty quick on it. And, I'll be honest with them. I'll tell them, this is just a quote. Don't spend a lot of time on it. We're just getting this for budgeting, or we're just getting this to show a potential customer. And because I have that relationship, I'm able to tell them that. I'm able to tell them, don't get yourself excited about it. Just help me out here. If you don't have that authentic relationship, then it becomes this crazy game and crazy dance where they're calling you 100 times saying, hey, that quote I sent you, no, I really don't want it. And then I look like I'm not being authentic on my side, and I'm just playing them. But being able to call up and, have that type of authentic relationship is very important.
Mm-hmm. And so how can vendors connect you in a non-intrusive manner? And I know you mentioned conferences and, putting flesh to flesh, but, taking the last year, I think conferences are getting back right now, but it's probably not to the same capacity for now. But So apart from conferences, any other means or channels to connect with you?
Yeah, actually, a means like this is somewhat of a replacement. So I do a number of webinars. If there is someone out there that wants to connect with me and do a webinar with me, I'd be happy to sit down and do that. And then we can connect from there as to, what a relationship might look like. But just generally speaking, go ahead and connect with me on LinkedIn, but don't send me your scripted thing. Let's have a real conversation on LinkedIn or even via email. Just don't send me your repeated Salesforce messages that say, hey, why haven't you responded to my email? Somehow the best way to communicate with me is to have a real and authentic relationship. That's it. That's the bottom line. And I will tell you that most CISOs will tell you the same thing if they're being honest.
Yeah, I think that's the underlying theme here with most CISOs I've spoken to. Because at the end of the day, we're all people, right?
Mhm.
We care about the same things. Um, so I did have a question I wanted to test on you here.
Okay.
Let's see if it works or not. I'm curious to what is it that you define as innovation in our space, in the cybersecurity space? Is it more along the lines of a new product, new service, or a new technology, or is it along the lines of like maybe for you to introducing new practices into the business? For example, to be able to monetize on security services that I don't know, you might
Mhm.
charge different BUs or you might resell to your customers and whatnot. Does that
Right.
make sense, the question?
Yep, it's a great question too. And so what defines innovation? And I actually believe that you've hit the nail on the head by saying all the things you said was I think all of those things, being able to bring new products to the business, being able to look at new technologies, being able to look at new practices. Frankly, also one of them you didn't say is taking a look at old practices and seeing how they can be revamped and made relevant. The one thing that I shy away from is this whole AI conversation. There's a lot of talk about AI. Really, AI is nothing more than machine learning. It's been, AI is a buzzword. And so I don't necessarily see that kind of thing as innovation right now because it's more of research than it is innovation. Innovation to me is taking something that's existing and reshaping it to something that can be useful within your organization or business, or even in your life for that matter. Being able innovation is taking a screwdriver and seeing how many different ways that you could use it, or taking a particular software tool that might be designed for network management and seeing how that can be utilized for security, continuous monitoring or security discovery of the network, using a tool like, for example, we use a product called Kentic, which has recently come. It's about 3 or 4 year old product, but it's recently become forefront because there were a couple of conversations had in regards to the Colonial Pipeline and otherwise, where Kentic has made some statements. That's a network monitoring tool from and a log collection tool from a more traditional network side of things, but we dove into it and said, wow, there's a lot of things that could be used here from a security perspective, and started innovating the tool to become that additional tool for us. Plus it saves money because we're using the same tool that somebody else is using already. So
Mm-hmm.
Innovation is to me is taking existing tools, existing situations, and making them better, making them more useful inside of your environment.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you
Sure.
for that. And just before we wrap this up, one final question. If you had unlimited funds, or let's just rephrase it, if money was never an issue, what would you do with your life? Do you see your day
Mm.
would be different or?
No, see, I love my job, and I keep telling my wife I'll never retire because I absolutely wake up every morning passionate about doing this job. So I know I wouldn't do that differently, but I definitely would probably move. I mentioned Montana earlier. I would probably move to Montana. I would probably maybe shorten my day a little bit so I can spend some time outdoors doing the photography that I talked about, or looking at the going to see the animals and things like that are out there. But I would definitely do that, and I would probably spend some time traveling to see my kids that are now spread out in different parts of the country. Being able to spend more time with them without annoying them too much inside of their homes.
Well, I mean, that's not it's a very modest, what's the word I'm looking for? Aspiration, right?
Right.
Very modest goal. I
Yeah.
mean, okay, and I think with that, we can wrap this up. And let me thank you again, Mark, for joining our call. I know you have a hard stop. I have a hard stop as well. I am looking forward to, continue our conversations in the future. Maybe we can speak a bit about aviation in Montana. I have
Yeah.
plans on going there in a few weeks. I'm coming up to Montana as well, so we
Good.
should catch up.
Yeah,
and yeah,
definitely.
And I think your answers were great, and great discussion and a lot of insights here. I'm very hopeful. Some of them might resonate with our listeners and might help some people along the way. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk later on when you get back from your trip, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right.
Stop recording.